Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you will be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is Chad Richardson. Chad, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
I can't believe people wouldn't know me to begin with. I am really famous. I've written a few New York best times or best sellers out there, or at least I did. Then I woke up. I'm Chad Richardson. I'm probably the lone hit country campus pastor of Celebration Church, and I am the campus pastor at the Mandeville Covington campus on the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain. So I'm across the lake from our Metairie and South Shore campuses. And what else do I need to know? Let's see, I'm married. I've got a beautiful wife of 27 years and 3 beautiful daughters, a beautiful granddaughter, and a really cool cat named Binks. So
you just alienated all of our dog listeners, but that's fine. Don't worry about it.
It was my wife's choice, though, not mine.
We tried to sit on the fence when it comes to the dog and cat conversation, but I guess if you're going to force us to get off the fence at some point, we'll have to do that. But for people that listen to this and they say, I like this Chad, I want to find out more about him, see what he's putting out there, where could they do that?
Sure. Well, I've got a personal page that people can go to on Facebook. It's just Pastor Chad Richardson. Real easy to look at this beautiful picture right here and find me according to match it up. And then they can also go to our campus page, which they can go to Celebration MCC on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. They can hear our sermons. We'll do Bible studies, those kind of things as well. And we'd love to have people come and join us.
Okay, I will put those links in the description. So for people that are listening, they're there ready for you to go and check out.
Well, I can imagine you saying all the different campuses where they are, that people the other side of the world are getting out the world map and trying to locate you.
Yeah, where's Mandeville or Covington?
Sure, or Mandeville, Covington.
But we're filming.
So if you go ahead.
No, we are doing this in New Orleans, so you're somewhere in this vicinity.
Yes. I'm due north of New Orleans, Louisiana. And so if you get a map out and find New Orleans, there's a beautiful lake called Lake Pontchartrain. And you go due north and you'll find us right across the lake. Mandeville historically was a vacation area way back in the day before there was a bridge that went directly down the center of Lake Pontchartrain. Yeah. You used to have to go all the way around, and people would escape New Orleans to come to Mandeville. So Mandeville is a very beautiful area, very gorgeous area. And a lot of people are still making their exodus from New Orleans to the North Shore. I think around 2,300 people a year moving to the North Shore from the South Shore every single year.
Wow. Well, you're a pastor, and you've been a pastor many years. Now, I messaged you beforehand, and you said to me, ministry isn't always what you think it's going to be. You have preconceived ideas or anything. Can you start to take us on this journey, maybe go back a few years about how you entered, what you thought was going to happen, and then some of the adventures of what did happen?
Yeah, and I know that when I first met you, you weren't a pastor, but you were, I think, the head of a media department.
Yeah.
Which is when I first met you. And even that, I don't know that you were a media guy. So which, whether in media and you weren't a media guy, or a pastor and you didn't intend to be a pastor. So either way, it didn't go quite how you planned, I assume.
No. Well, I grew up, my dad was a pastor when I was a kid. So I grew up in a ministry family, and, of course, things don't always work out as they plan. My mother's and father's marriage didn't work out, and my father stayed in ministry a few more years. The second marriage didn't work out, and he stepped away from the pulpit. His words were, if I can't hold a family together, I don't have any business being in the pulpit leading. And so he found other ways to lead in ministry, and he's been a principal and a teacher. And so he showed me early on that you can do ministry. God's calling is never revoked. It's just a matter of sometimes it changes venue. And his went to the education world, and God used him in great ways as a coach, as a teacher, and eventually as an administrator and principal. And he retired as a principal. And so, I when I went to high school, I had dreams that I wanted to be in music. My background is actually music. I went to start off in university with a vocal scholarship to sing, and start off that way. And I had dreams of grandeur that maybe one day I could sing on Broadway. I actually love musicals and operas and things like that. And so I'm classically trained vocally. Went through all the voice lessons and all the diction lessons. And I mean, just you go on, I've done it. I've done the foreign language stuff. And so that was my background. And I never intended to go into ministry, never thought about ministry. Matter of fact, I had walked away from the church for many years. And God used a series of events in my life to bring me back, namely my middle daughter and her health, that really brought me back. And I got back involved in the church, and some little ladies that were sitting in the pew in front of me. I just started going to church again. I really wasn't in love with Jesus, but I didn't deny him either. But they heard me sing, and they said, you ought to lead our music. And at the time, they had a deacon in the church that was both physically deaf and tone deaf, but God love his heart, he was doing his very best to lead their music. And but they turned around and said, you need to do this. And of course, the pastor visited my home about the next week or so and talked to me about that possibility. And and so God got a hold of my heart, got me back involved in the church. I volunteered as a music leader. And so I went to New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary to do church music. And so that's what my undergraduate degree is church music. That's where my ministry world started. I thought I was going to be a music guy the rest of my life. And then one day I was approached about being a music guy and a youth guy. And I thought youth guys needed lobotomies. I thought they were nuts. I didn't think anybody wanted to work with young people were just crazy. I mean, and so I took this role thinking, okay, I'll kind of do half-hearted effort with the youth. I'll pass it off to somebody else that volunteers, and I'll just focus my time on music. And it didn't work out that way. God began stirring my heart as I began learning how to teach the Word of God, which I really didn't know how to do, and really opened my eyes to the world of pastoral work and working with families and of all generations, from the oldest to the youngest. I already loved old people, so it was awesome to be around the old people, elderly people of the church. And then I loved babies too, and I loved everybody in between. And so God really developed my heart about pastoral work. And one day the church asked me, said, look, if we grow to a certain point, we know that you can't do both of these positions at the same time and successfully do them. Which one would you do? And I couldn't believe it came out of my mouth. And I told them, I said, I want to do the youth work then. And they said, you sure? You came here telling us all about your love for music. And I said, look, I'm going to always love music. It's always been a passion of mine. I said, but I'm loving the pastoral work, and I'm loving these kids. And, at the time, we had seen a lot of kids come to faith in Christ. I started off with 6 kids in the youth group. We'd grown the youth group to about 50 or 60 kids. And we had a lot of their moms and dads involved in the ministry helping me. And it was just a fantastic work. And God used that to be the launching pad to go into pastoral work. And so before y'all met me, I actually took my first pastoral position as a lead pastor of a little small church in West Texas, about an hour and a half from Amarillo, Texas. Those want to get on a map and look where that is. It's the panhandle of Texas, and Tornado Alley. And I took this little church that had been pastor after pastor run off every 2 years, just constant plague of issues. And that's where God led me to take my first role pastoring. And I was there for 2.5 years, and we saw great work. We established children's work and got moms and dads involved in teaching kids there, established a youth work and got volunteers established in there, working there, and started a van ministry, picking kids up from mom and dads that didn't want to bring their kids to church. So we started doing that to reach kids. We saw that grow, and it was awesome. And that church is still doing that work to this day. But then Katrina happened. God stirred our heart about coming and helping. And through that process, Pastor Dennis talked to us about coming to Celebration and at least temporarily taking on the role of my role was pastor of technology, because I'm a tech nerd. I love technology. And I dabble with video and media. But yeah, it wasn't like my first love. It was just something I enjoyed doing and playing around with. But in that, he wanted me to come and try to develop the West Bank ministry. And they had a plan at that time to launch a West Bank campus. And so this was pre-West Bank, where Pastor David Ford, I love very much, is leading now. And so we came, and our plan, here goes that plan again. Our plan was to come, do this work on building cell group, life groups, and try to build a volunteer base in the media ministry and audiovisual ministry. And there came a point in time, Pastor Dennis said, Chad, I'd like to ask you and Dawn to start driving on the West Bank, to start praying about where you might want to live, to pray about where we might launch a campus. Because at this point in time, I think we had 9 or 10 life groups going. We had about 100 to 150 people engaged in life group ministry. Many of those intergenerational. Thank you, Miss Daphne, for introducing me to that word. And so we began praying, and during that time, God began stirring our heart and told my wife and I independently that you're not the one to lead this campus. And I was kind of left flabbergasted. I didn't understand. I was confused. I'm like, well, God, why'd you bring me down here if this wasn't the plan all along? And God had other plans. God had other plans for us. He brought us a celebration to teach us some things about teamwork, because I had not understood that fully yet. Understand about planning a little better, because I was still struggling with that. Still struggle with it, but planning a little better. Taught me some things about working with ministries that wasn't the things I led, and all that kind of stuff. Just taught me a lot of things. Introduced me to broken people like I'd never met before, with addictions and things that I had never run into and encountered anywhere other than Celebration. And so God used all that to open our hearts to realize he had something different. And in that time, my wife was given a word when God told Abraham that I'm going to send you to a land you've never been. And it said a land north. It was kind of interesting. My wife shared that devotion with me, and I said, that's interesting. That's kind of an odd thing that God would point you to that. And so we began praying about what that meant. And I had to have a conversation with Pastor Dennis that we believed God may be leading us elsewhere. We didn't understand why. Maybe it's the North Shore. That we were kind of talking those terms back then. But Celebration wasn't anywhere at that time about launching anything North Shore, not Slidell, not Mandeville, Covington. That wasn't anywhere in the cards at the time. And so we were just kind of like, well, maybe that means we're supposed to step away from this ministry. We'll serve her faithfully until God, you show us otherwise. And so we did. We served. And Alaska came a calling. And it was odd because I never sent a resume to Alaska to consider me. They got my resume through some other source. And we were actually in an evacuation state for Hurricane Gustav when I got contacted by them. I had talked to some churches in Nebraska. I talked to a church in California. Those are all north from where I'm at, so maybe this is where I'm supposed to go. Alaska, who lives in Alaska? People in igloos. I mean, I didn't know.
A bunch
I
of
didn't
Eskimos.
think anybody lived there.
I guess they might need you as well. So.
Yeah.
They do. They do.
I have a thought, Chad, as you're talking. You hear people say about finding your destiny. You've got to seek God. You've got to know what your destiny is. And I'm listening to you. If you had said at the beginning, oh, what is my destiny? You would probably have been fairly stuck. And I often say to people, your destiny is when you get up in the morning and you live that day.
Yes.
That is your destiny. Yes. And as people are listening to this, and there are those that are saying, well, I don't know what my destiny is. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't have to worry about that, do you really?
No, you don't. I tell people all the time, because people say, well, I don't know what God wants me to do. I said, God wants you to take the step in front of you. I said, when people tell, I personally, I've always struggled when people say, well, what is your 5-year vision, 10-year vision? I'm like, I don't have a foggiest notion. Yeah. I said, I look in the Bible and I don't read almost anyone in the Bible that knew what they were going to be doing 5 or 10 years down the road. They didn't know what they were going to do when they woke up in the morning, let alone 5 or 10 years. I kind of laugh at the 5-10-year vision. I know things I would like to do, but and this is just me personally. I can't say this for everybody, but in my life, God has laughed at my plans. And there's things I've wanted to do and wanted to accomplish. And I can promise you, they've never looked anything like I thought they would. They've never amounted to what I planned and conjured up in my mind. Even and I stick to the verse where God says He can do even more than I can think or imagine. And I've got a very creative mind. I am a very creative individual, and I can think some incredible things. And yet, none of the things I've ever thought of have ever come to fruition. God's always done something different, or He's taken something and it accomplished what I was thinking about, but in a completely different way than I ever thought it would. Yeah. And it's always blown my mind. And taking us to Alaska, I never thought I'd come back to Louisiana. And lo and behold, God said, no, I'm going to bring you. And He brought me back by way of a church. I had served as a youth and a music minister. I served 6 years as their pastor. I served 4.5 years as associate youth and music. One of those roles that everything that the pastor doesn't do. That's what I did. So I served 4.5 years in that role, came back, served in 6 years in that church, and led faithfully. Never thought I'd go back there. And definitely didn't think I would have a second shot at celebration and be back in Louisiana. I mean, and this is full circle, by the way. This is Mandeville, is where my wife and I met in high school. So we met almost 29 years ago. Actually, it is 29 years ago. 29 years ago, we met in high school at Mandeville High School. And we live in Mandeville School District. My youngest daughter now goes to Mandeville High School, now walks the halls of where we went to school and met. And so, never what I think.
I'm thinking back too when you wanted to do music and you said, no, this is my passion, so I do. And I'll do the youth. But God, in a way, if I'm hearing this right, He didn't say to you, He didn't give you a vision for doing the youth or anything. He changed something in your heart.
He did.
And so, instead of music being everything to your heart, He changed and gave you a heart for those young people. So the way God leads you, it seems to me, listening to you, can be in many, 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 many different ways. Dawn had a scripture to go north. God changed your heart this way. The Pastor Dennis asked you if you would go somewhere. So again, it's not like God has a methodology for leading you forward. Right. But He's done it with you in many, many different ways. I sometimes think, too, people rely on, I need a prophetic word to know what I'm doing, or that they're looking for that prophetic word. I don't know if you ever had any, but you certainly haven't mentioned any.
The only prophetic word I ever received was in a dream. I had a dream, sound like Martin Luther King. I had a dream. And that dream took place in the year 2000. I can remember that's precisely. It was the year I also was ordained into the gospel ministry. It was the year I graduated with my undergraduate degree. And that dream I had was standing on a platform and joining hands with people of all backgrounds, all racial skin tones, looking out among a congregation that was extremely diverse. So I shared that with my pastor, Pastor Joe Dunn, at the time I served under. And I told him, I said, I don't know what this means. I said, surely I didn't just conjure that up, and I haven't watched any movies like that. So I know it's not some memory stuck in my mind from something I seen on TV. I said, I don't understand. He said, well, Chad, he said, I couldn't tell you that either. He said, but there's no doubt that God is one day calling you to pastoral work, which I didn't understand at the time because I was the music minister at this church. It was a little small church. I was serving part-time or bivocationally. And so I didn't understand that. I shared that with others, people that I have greatly admired over the years. And commonly the word that would come back to me was that in order to serve in what you're seeing in that vision, you're going to have to be in a church that is in a city somewhere. And I'm like, okay, well, if you hadn't heard from my accent, I'm not a city guy. And I'm not really a true country redneck either. And so I'm kind of that, I'm not really a suburban guy. I call myself suburban rural is what I am, so I'm not quite city enough to be suburban and not suburban enough to be true suburban. And I'm not country enough to be true rural. I'm some hybrid weirdo, and so, And so I'm thinking, for me to do what these people I admire tell me this is where I would need to be to accomplish this vision, man, that it would definitely put me out of my comfort zone, but I didn't feel any compassion or desire in my heart to go in that kind of direction. I just never got excited about it. And so I'm like, okay, God, well, what does this mean? You keep leading me, Lord, to these churches that are in predominantly white areas in Alaska. Oh my gosh, we were in probably a 95, 96, 97% Anglo community of 4,000. In East Texas, I was in a 98% Anglo community with diversity around the community, but not in the community. And then here in Mandeville, we're in the probably 90, Mandeville specifically is about 90, I think 95, 96% Anglo. Now Covington, it gets a little bit more diverse, but not much more. It's maybe like 89% Anglo. It's still very, very heavily Anglo community. And so I'm like, well, God, why do you keep leading me something you gave me a dream for to areas that don't seem to be possible? And I never did understand it. Well, let me tell you the funny thing. Where I'm at now, in our community, our campus, we run about 120 people. And so we're a little over 4.5-year-old campus. And so when I first got there, we had about maybe 2 or 3 African-American families there. The rest were Anglo white family, Caucasian families. In the last 2 or 3 months, we've now been given and blessed with a community of about 30 to 40 Hispanic individuals, families that come now. We're one of just maybe a handful across the whole region in the North Shore that now have a Hispanic work going on, and there was nowhere in the plans for that. We're still trying to figure it out. And so I'm now seeing something that 21 years ago, God showed me in a vision. Everybody else told me this is the way it would happen, and none of it's been true. It's happened in a way totally opposite and in an area that it shouldn't be happening. And I'm just walking it day by day, asking God, give me the grace for today to accomplish what needs to be done. Because every time I think of something I need to do, it doesn't work out that way. Somebody tells me, go chase this rabbit. That rabbit doesn't jump down a hole and doesn't gone away. I'm not going to look for something else. I'm just having to trust God day by day by day, because everybody else's plans have not worked out anyway like they thought they would. And mine definitely hadn't. God always changes plans, it seems like, on me.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, right at the beginning. Before you were going to church, you weren't really interested. And you said about your daughter having some health issues and that driving you to go to church. Could you talk a bit about that situation and going to church? Presumably, whatever you were seeking for, the help, whatever it was, presumably you found it because I guess you stayed. So can you just talk a bit about what was it? What drove you to go to church? Was you trying to help your daughter? Were you just doing whatever you thought would help her? And why did you stay?
Yeah, good question. My wife one day, she was a new believer, and she had gotten really excited at Celebration Church. So Celebration has been in our history for 25 years. 26 years. Celebration has been involved in our life somehow, through connection or direct attendance, one way or another. But my wife, while I was trying my stint in military life, worked at Celebration, got real excited, real pumped up. And so we moved. I started working in the oil field. I come back home. Military didn't work out for me. I go in the oil field. She said, Chad, I want to go to church. I'm like, yeah, we'll go to church. But again, I just had no interest, didn't really care. And so one day she asked our landlord, she asked him about, do you know a church around here? Well, I don't go to church, but my wife does. And she goes to this church. So I come home that day and she says, Chad, I'm going to put the pants on the family. I'm going to take the belt off of yours and put it on mine. And I'm going to take us to church. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go reluctantly, but I go. And we kind of attend church. Well, our second child was in the womb. And over a course of time, she was born. I was kind of attending church here and there. The people were nice. I would go because my wife wanted me to go. But then there came a point in time after my second daughter was born, we noticed that she couldn't hear. And my wife called me just frantic when I was at work one day and said, Chad, Brittany can't hear. I'm like, what do you mean she can't hear? I said, well, wait till I get home. I got this big booming voice. If anybody gonna make somebody jump, I can do it, And so let me get home. We'll take care of this. Maybe you're overreacting, And so I got home. She said, no, Chad, I've been banging pots and pans, everything, nothing. I said, well, let me give it a try. I got home and did all the same things, yelled, get my big booming beast voiced out, and nothing was working. She wasn't responding to anything. And of course, I'm admitting how vain I am here, and the fact that how could I have a child that has a handicap? So that little bit is what God used to break me, to get me on my knees and say, well, God, heal my child. I mean, how could I have a handicapped child? God, I can't have a handicapped kid. I mean, why would you do that to me? What am I supposed to do? I mean, I just kind of had all these, just being transparent here. I mean, I was, you can call me flaky or whatever. That's where I was at, but God used that to break my pride, break my ego, and drop me to my knees. And so probably for the first time, maybe ever in my life, it put me on my knees, begging God. And so going to church meant a little more to me, because I was seeking God out. I was wanting healing for my daughter. And through that process, God began clawing out of me this desire that he loved me, and that the people around the church loved me. And let me tell you, this church, oh my gosh, it was the coldest, lifeless church you could possibly imagine. Yet this was the place that God put my soul on fire. And I don't even know how I explain that. People want to say, tell me a church to go to. I would not direct anybody to this church. Well, Katrina wiped it out, but I would not direct anybody to this church. Yet this was the church that God used to stir my heart. And it was the church that God led me to begin serving him musically. And it was the church that gave me at least backing verbally that they would be behind me to go to seminary. So God used my daughter to stir my heart, break my pride, bust my ego, put me in a cold, lifeless church, and learn to love the local church. And I'll tell you, that's where God gave me the love for the local church, not the big church, the church, which, by the way, represents like 80% of churches in the world are these little, small, itty-bitty churches. 1%, 2% are the mega churches. It's the small churches that represent the bulk. And God gave me the love and passion for the local church. And in a small, cold, dead, lifeless church, using my daughter as a instrument of his grace and mercy.
Well, it certainly breaks people. If anybody's got a formula for how God moves, a formula for how he moves you forward, there's no formula in this. And it's all, at the end of the day, God moves through relationship, his relationship with us. Going back to that prophetic word, I see people often wanting direction for their lives and looking for a prophetic word to follow that prophetic word. But then you come against a brick wall, because the prophetic word, I think, is a sign we will meet. It isn't a direction we go. Does that make sense? And so I often
sure. You think about...
I often say to people, well, have a good look at the prophetic word, understand it, and then put it on the shelf and get on, because you will come to a place like you did, recently now. You go, I remember that prophetic word. This is God's confirmation of where I'm at. This is affirmation. This is his sign. But I see too often the prophetic word being something that people are seeking to follow.
Or even make it happen.
Yeah,
they say, that's a prophetic word, let me make it happen, without going, okay, well, this is God speaking to me saying this is going to happen, but without going, well, it's in his timing that it will happen. It's not in our timing that this thing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you think about the Israelites, they were given a word that they were going to inherit the land of Israel, right? Or the land flowing with milk and honey. Mm-hmm. Well, the majority of those that were ever heard that word didn't make it. They died. It didn't happen in their generation. It was generations later. And almost didn't happen because you had a whole generation didn't know anything about the Lord and what he had done. I mean, you see these stories unfold, and yeah, there was a word given to them, and they were trying to march forward the best they could with what they had at the time. And many of them didn't ever see it come to fruition, but they had the hope of something there. And so they hung their hat on the hope, but to try to make it happen, it's silly, it's folly to do that. I think it was a prophet Elijah that was looking for the Lord in the big winds out there, and he was the storms, and you see the story, and all of a sudden he gets in his little cave there, and God speaks to him in the still small voice. And so I think oftentimes people are looking for the big stuff, and it's like God's saying, you know what? He says, be faithful in little, I'll make you master over much. So be faithful with a little word I give you here. Be faithful with that. And then I can entrust you more. I know that your faith is being proved out. It's being lived out. I can give you a little more. And I'll tell you what, that has been a mantra for me now for probably the better part of a year. Is God just reminded me to be faithful with the little. I'll make you master over much. But we've got to show faithfulness to what we already got. I've told this to people before. Why would God bless us with the things we ask if we're not already doing well with the things we already got? And that's something God has really slapped me in the face with a lot over life. I have to be reminded about it over and over, especially when I get to those, well, God, why is this happening? Why? And God says, don't worry about it, silly. Just do what I called you to do. Be faithful what I've given you to do. And one day, something else will take place. And so that's what I do every day. I wake up and I say, God, help me be faithful. I'm yours. Some days I do it well. Some days I stink. And I've got to get on my face and ask God and beg his forgiveness because I've just really messed up. But God's word is true where he says his mercies are new every morning. And every day I get a fresh perspective. And I get a chance to get up and try it all over again. And every day he shows me that his plans change, and or not his plans change. He changes my plans is a better way of saying that. Yeah. And so that's God's story in my life in a nutshell.
Well, it takes me back to where I picked up with you about destiny. Your destiny is when you wake up in the morning. And to do those things, just live your destiny out of today and be faithful in the day, and the rest will unfold like it has for you. And we're going to be interested watching from afar to see what else is unfolding, because
Amen.
That is quite
I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah, that is quite some journey that I hope will be a great encouragement to people who are saying, what am I meant to be doing? Where am I meant to be going? How am I meant to be doing? I want to be doing this. That maybe your story will help them take a deep breath, relax, and say,
just put one foot in the front of the other.
Yeah, today's
That's
destiny.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Chad. We really appreciate it. I know that over the years,
it's my pleasure.
We've kind of seen each other, and then you'll disappear or we'll disappear, and it'll be a distance that we're kind of seeing each other from. But we love that you're back in town. We get to see you a bit more often at least. Thank you so much.
I was even on y'all side of the pond. And for the 2012 Olympics, I believe, in London. I didn't get to see y'all.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, goodness knows where we were. But thank you, Chad. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
Yes,
so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If it inspired you, please rate us and subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast platform.